A former candidate for state senate in Delaware and a current assistant vice president at Villanova University, Meredith Chapman, has been identified as one of the two people who were found dead late last night in this Radnor Township home. Authorities say she was killed by her lover's wife.
You had a man that was married, that was having an affair with this other woman. The wife knew about it, and this was a calculated, planned attack. She broke into the house, she was lying in wait, and she shot her as soon as she walked in, and then she shot herself.
Police believe Jennair Gerardot of Delaware went to Chapman's home on Lowry's Lane in Radnor Township. Gerardot broke into the home, waited for Chapman to come home, and then she shot her in the head.
There were emails and text messages indicating what she planned to do, and the detectives are still sorting that out.
She waited in the darkness, gun loaded, heart pounding, every breath calculated. And when the front door finally opened, when her rival stepped across that threshold with keys still clutched in her hand, she pulled the trigger. A single shot to the head. Meredith Chapman, 33 years old, brilliant, beautiful, and ambitious, collapsed to the kitchen floor. Her crime? Falling in love with someone else's husband. But this wasn't just a crime of passion. This was something far more brutal. This was the culmination of months of meticulous surveillance, obsessive planning, and a descent into madness that no one saw coming. Two women would die that spring evening in 2018. One, a victim of jealous rage. The other, a victim of her own demons. This is Cold Crime Cases, and today we're diving deep into one of the most chilling murder-suicides in recent history. A case that asks the question, where does heartbreak end and homicide begin? But before we unravel this twisted story of obsession and betrayal, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Seriously, pause and click it. Subscribe to Cold Crime Cases if you haven't already, because we bring you the most compelling true crime stories every single week. And drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Are you listening from New York? Los Angeles? Maybe you're tuning in from across the world? We want to know. Our community is global, and we love hearing from each and every one of you. Now, let's get into this absolutely devastating story. To understand how this tragedy unfolded, we need to go back. Back to when the players in this deadly triangle were just living their lives, unaware that fate was about to entangle them in the most horrific way imaginable. Meredith Sullivan Chapman was born on January 31st in Newark, Delaware. From the very beginning, she was exceptional, driven, magnetic, the kind of person who lit up every room she entered. Her smile was radiant, infectious, the kind that made you want to smile back. She wasn't just pretty, she was accomplished in ways that most people only dream about. Meredith graduated from the University of Delaware, and her rise was meteoric. She didn't just get a job at her alma mater, she became the director of marketing. She lectured, she inspired, she managed entire teams of professionals, and she did it with a grace and competence that belied her young age. Before that, she'd worked as a television reporter for 2 years, commanding the screen with the same natural charisma that defined everything she did. But Meredith wasn't just focused on her career. She was deeply political, passionate about making a difference. She worked as a communications and external relations manager in the Delaware House of Representatives, and at just 32 years old, she launched a campaign for the state Senate in 2016. She didn't win, but the fact that she ran at all spoke volumes about her ambition, her courage, her refusal to accept limitations. Delaware noticed. She was named to the state's prestigious 40 Under 40 list, recognizing the most successful and influential young professionals in the region. On social media, she was vibrant and engaged, constantly posting photos and videos, always beaming with that 1,000-watt smile. Her life looked perfect. Absolutely perfect. In 2009, Meredith married Luke Chapman, a local councilman. She supported his political career enthusiastically, appearing at events, campaigning by his side, playing the role of the devoted political wife. To the outside world, they were the power couple, young, attractive, successful, destined for greatness. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming, cracks that would eventually shatter everything. Now let's talk about Mark Gerardot. Mark was 18 years old in the summer of 1986 when he first laid eyes on the woman who would become his wife. Her name was Jennair Gerardot, and she was 16, working at a Taco Bell in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Mark thought she looked beautiful, even in that fast food uniform. Both of them were involved in musical theater, sharing that creative spark, but they didn't actually speak that day. Life moved on. 4 years later, fate intervened. They ran into each other again, by pure chance, and this time, they connected. They started dating, and it was electric. Mark and Jennair were polar opposites in personality. She was bold, rebellious, unfiltered. She spoke her mind and didn't care what anyone thought. She was strong, fearless, brutally honest. Mark, on the other hand, was shy, reserved, someone who preferred to stay in the background. But somehow, these differences created a magnetic pull between them. After just a few months together, they both knew. This was it. This was forever. Jennair told her friends that Mark was the one, that she would do anything for him. Anything. Remember that word. It becomes important later. They married in October of 1993. They chose not to have children, deciding instead to focus entirely on each other. They traveled, they hiked, they spoiled their dogs like they were children. They seemed happy. Not perfect, no marriage is, but solid, committed. They weathered arguments like any couple, but they always came back to each other. Then, the financial crisis hit, hard. Both Mark and Jennair worked in marketing, and suddenly their world was crumbling. Jennair lost her job. She searched desperately for new work but couldn't find anything. For someone like Jennair, someone so strong and independent, this was devastating. She spiraled. She felt worthless, stuck, trapped in a reality she couldn't control. The depression consumed her. Eventually, she was formally diagnosed and began treatment. But the damage was done. The dynamic in their marriage had shifted. More arguments erupted, more resentment built, and Mark, whether he admitted it to himself or not, was pulling away. Fast forward to 2017. Mark was interviewing for a creative director position at the University of Delaware. The woman interviewing him was Meredith Chapman. She was 15 years younger than him. She was going to be his boss. Mark had reservations, but the moment they started talking, something clicked. He was impressed by her professionalism, her maturity, her experience. He found her intriguing, captivating even. Every time someone scrolls past, another woman's suffering fades into silence. Don't let that happen. Subscribe and make her story matter. Meredith offered him the job. Mark and Jennair discussed it. They lived in South Carolina at the time, and this was a big opportunity. They decided Mark would move to Delaware immediately, and Jennair would wrap up their affairs and join him later. It seemed like a solid plan, logical, practical. But here's where things get complicated. Mark also had another interview lined up, this one in Colorado. He hadn't officially accepted the Delaware position yet, so he decided to fly out and see what Colorado had to offer. But halfway through that interview, he made up his mind. He wanted Delaware. He wanted to see where that opportunity would take him. Or maybe, if we're being honest, he wanted to see where Meredith Times would take him. Mark started his new job. He was impressed by Meredith, not just as a boss, but as a woman. So when she invited him out for drinks one evening, he didn't hesitate. He said yes immediately. That night stretched into hours. They talked about everything: life, work, dreams, pain. They connected on a level that felt profound, almost spiritual. Mark opened up about things he'd never shared with anyone, not even his wife. The deaths of his parents, his brother, the grief that had been eating at him for years. He also talked about his marriage. He didn't hide the fact that he had a wife, but he didn't paint a rosy picture either. He told Meredith that the love had grown cold, that he and Jennair argued constantly, that something fundamental had broken between them. The chemistry was undeniable. The evening ended with kisses, and although Mark claims he felt guilty immediately afterward, something had been set in motion. something that couldn't be stopped. Meredith, for her part, was in a similar situation. She'd been married to Luke for 9 years, but according to her, things hadn't been good for a long time. They were staying together for appearances, going through the motions. There was no passion left, no connection. And so, the affair began in earnest. About a month after Mark moved to Delaware, he confessed his love to Meredith. She felt the same way. They were falling, fast and hard, into something dangerous and intoxicating. Meanwhile, back in South Carolina, Jennair was finishing up the paperwork for their rental house, completely unaware that her husband was living a double life. Or maybe she sensed it. Maybe on some level, she knew something was terribly wrong. January 2018. Jennair finally moved to Delaware. She'd been separated from Mark for months, and she was excited to reunite, to start fresh in this new city. But the moment she arrived, she knew something was off. Mark was distant, cold, detached. He'd changed completely. Jennair's instincts kicked in. There was another woman. She confronted Mark directly, asking him point blank if something was going on with Meredith. Mark denied it. He insisted their relationship was purely professional. Jennair wanted to believe him. She tried to believe him. But deep down, she knew he was lying. So she did what any desperate, terrified spouse might do. She hired a company to hack Mark's phone. Suddenly, she had access to everything: texts, calls, photos. Every message he sent to Meredith, every intimate conversation, every declaration of love, it was all there, laid bare before her. She also started listening to his conversations in real time. How? She'd obtained recordings of his private discussions with Meredith. She was listening to everything, watching everything. Jennair was no longer just suspicious. She was gathering evidence, building a case, preparing for war. Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2018. Jennair confronted Mark with everything. She played recordings. She showed him messages. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. Mark couldn't lie anymore. He confessed. Yes, he was having an affair. Yes, he was in love with Meredith. And yes, he wanted to be with her. Jennair was shattered. She'd assumed this was just a midlife crisis, a fling with a younger woman that would burn out quickly. But this was different. This was real. Mark was choosing Meredith over their 20-year marriage. She couldn't process it. She couldn't accept it. Mark suggested couples therapy. Jennair agreed, but they went in with completely different goals. He wanted confirmation that it couldn't be saved, that he could walk away with a clear conscience. One day, while preparing for a therapy session, Mark found something disturbing in his jacket: a listening device. Jennair hadn't just hacked his phone. She'd been recording his every conversation, listening to him in real time, tracking his every move. Mark felt violated. The confrontation that followed was explosive. But that wasn't all. Jennair had also contacted the University of Delaware, informing them about the unprofessional relationship between Mark and Meredith. She'd reached out to Meredith's husband Luke, telling him about the affair. She was scorching the earth, trying to destroy everything Mark and Meredith had built. Despite the chaos, things calmed down temporarily. Jennair promised to stop spying. Mark agreed to continue therapy. But after 3 sessions, Mark was done. He told Jennair that as soon as he established residency in Delaware, which would happen in May, he was filing for divorce. It was over. Meanwhile, Meredith ended her marriage to Luke. They parted amicably, both agreeing that their relationship had run its course. And since the university administration now knew about Meredith and Mark's affair, they both started looking for new jobs. If this was your daughter, sister, or friend, would you really scroll away without doing something as small as clicking subscribe? In April, Meredith landed a position at Villanova University as the Assistant Vice President for Marketing and Creative Services. She was the first to move, renting a house in Radnor, a wealthy, quiet, safe suburb outside Philadelphia. Mark planned to join her soon. They were building a life together, finally free from the secrets and lies. But Jennair was far from at peace. She was drowning in rage, sorrow, jealousy, and desperation. She was alone in Delaware, a city where she had no friends, no family, no support system. She'd moved there for Mark, and now he'd abandoned her for someone younger, more successful, more beautiful. The bitterness consumed her. Still, she gave Mark the impression that she was coping. She even made a deal with him. She'd sign the divorce papers, but only if he continued living with her and spending time with her until May. Dinners, walks, quality time. It was a strange arrangement, but Mark agreed. For a while, it seemed to work. They got along reasonably well. Maybe she was healing. Maybe she was accepting the inevitable. But then Mark found another listening device in his jacket. Jennair had lied again. She'd never stop spying. The discovery led to another massive blowout. Mark, in a fit of rage, broke a table. He said things he regretted. Jennair, in response, nearly threw herself from their 7th-floor apartment. Mark was terrified. His wife was unraveling completely. He urged her to seek professional help. She agreed, starting regular sessions with a psychiatrist. Over time, Mark believed she was improving, coming to terms with the divorce, ready to move on. He thought they could end things amicably. He was wrong. April 23, 2018. Meredith posted a photo on Instagram. She was standing in front of Villanova University, beaming with excitement. The caption expressed her joy about this new chapter in her life. She looked happy, hopeful, free. That same day, Mark was supposed to meet Jennair at a restaurant to finalize the details of their divorce. He arrived first and waited. Then, his phone buzzed. A text from Jennair. She was running late, had taken the wrong route. 10 minutes later, another message. She wasn't coming. He should just go home. Then came the photo. A picture of trash, a used condom. Mark's stomach dropped. He knew instantly what it meant. Jennair had gone to Meredith's house. She'd been digging through the garbage. She'd found evidence of their intimacy, and she was spiraling. 3 more messages followed in quick succession. You ruined my life. I hope you never find happiness. And then, the final message. Goodbye. Mark panicked. He tried calling Meredith. No answer. He tried again. Nothing. He imagined Jennair confronting Meredith, screaming at her, maybe even attacking her. He had to get to Radnor. He had to make sure Meredith was okay. He drove as fast as he could. When he arrived at Meredith's house, he looked through the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. Meredith was lying face down on the kitchen floor. There was blood on her leg. She wasn't moving. She wasn't breathing. Mark burst through the door, his mind reeling, unable to process what he was seeing. He ran back outside, screaming, in total shock. A neighbor, alarmed by Mark's behavior, came over to see what was happening. He went inside the house and saw what Mark had seen. A woman on the floor, keys still clutched in her hand. She'd been shot the moment she walked through her own front door. The neighbor checked for a pulse. There was none. Meredith Chapman was dead. Mark, still in a daze, went back inside. That's when he saw the second body. In the living room, dressed entirely in black, was Jennair. She turned the gun on herself. The police arrived. Initially, they couldn't locate the weapon, so they considered the possibility that a third party was involved. Mark became the prime suspect, especially since he was behaving erratically, yelling at officers, completely hostile. But when investigators finally moved the bodies, they found the gun beneath Jennair's lifeless form. It had been fired twice, once into Meredith's head, once into her own. Mark was taken in for questioning. He told them everything, showing them the messages Jennair had sent him while he waited at the restaurant. The pieces started falling into place. The investigation revealed the full scope of Jennair's obsession. This wasn't a spontaneous crime of passion. This was premeditated murder. Jennair had headed toward Radnor early in the afternoon of April 23rd. By 2:20 p.m., she'd stopped at a gas station near Meredith's house. She'd gone through Meredith's trash, confirming what she already knew. that Mark and Meredith were living together, sleeping together, building a future together. Then she broke into the house. And she waited. Meredith likely arrived home between 5 and 6 p.m., probably thinking about dinner, maybe planning to call Mark, excited about her new job and their new life together. She stepped through her front door, keys in hand. Jennair shot her in the head. Then, after sending those final messages to Mark, including that haunting goodbye, Jennair turned the gun on herself. Imagine if it was your child, your sister, or your friend. Would you want their story buried under noise or told with care? Subscribing helps make sure her story doesn't fade away. Not ready to subscribe? That's okay. But at least tell me why in the comments. I want to learn from you. Police found a rented car parked near the house, the vehicle Jennair had used that day. Inside were binoculars, ammunition, latex gloves, and earplugs. She'd rented the car 10 days earlier. A neighbor reported seeing a woman 2 days before the murder, lurking near Meredith's house, watching it through binoculars. This had been planned for weeks, maybe months. When Mark returned to the home he'd shared with Jennair, he started going through her things, trying to understand how this had happened. What he found was beyond disturbing. It was the work of someone who'd completely lost touch with reality. Bank statements revealed separate accounts Jennair had opened specifically to fund her surveillance operation. Phone bills showed calls to the hacking company. Her computer search history was filled with searches on how to track someone, how to install listening devices, how to break into homes undetected. Mark checked his wardrobe and made a chilling discovery. Every single jacket and coat he owned had a listening device sewn into the lining. Jennair had been regularly retrieving these devices, downloading the data, reinstalling them, and sewing them back in. He'd been wearing bugs every single day, completely unaware that his wife was listening to every conversation he had. 12 notebooks were found in Jennair's belongings. 12. Each one filled with transcriptions of Mark and Meredith's conversations. Jennair had listened to hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of recordings and written everything down. Every "I love you," every intimate detail, every plan they made for their future together. She documented it all, with obsessive precision. Jennair had opened a separate bank account to purchase the items she needed for her surveillance operation. A lock-picking kit, likely used to break into Mark's office at the university. Spy software, installed on all his computers. A DNA testing kit, used to collect samples from his clothing. GPS trackers, installed in both Mark's car and Meredith's. She'd even named the trackers. Mark's device was labeled "Lying Jerk." Meredith's was labeled with a vulgar, hateful slur. Jennair had access to Mark's phone and had downloaded thousands of messages he and Meredith had exchanged on Snapchat. She knew everything. Every secret. Every moment of intimacy. Every stolen kiss. On March 20th, Jennair purchased a gun. Over the following weeks, she visited a shooting range several times, practicing. The last time she went to the range was just hours before she killed Meredith. Mark also found a letter Jennair had written weeks before the murder. In it, she expressed how much she'd loved being a wife and life partner, how fulfilled she'd felt taking care of her family. But there was also rage in those pages. She wrote that Mark and Meredith couldn't get away with what they'd done, that she deserved respect, that she needed control, that she had to take matters into her own hands. The letter wasn't just a suicide note. It was a manifesto, a declaration of war. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, I'm honestly curious what's holding you back. Drop it in the comments. I actually want to know. Police spoke with Jennair's psychiatrist, asking if she'd noticed any warning signs. Shockingly, the doctor said no. Jennair had appeared to be coping, even talking about starting a new life and moving away from Delaware. She'd been diagnosed with PTSD, triggered by Mark's infidelity and the impending divorce. She'd also been treated for depression for years. But after Mark showed the letter to another specialist, a darker picture emerged. That specialist suggested Jennair may have exhibited signs of borderline personality disorder. She'd been devastated, enraged, consumed by jealousy, but she'd managed to convince almost everyone around her, including Mark, that she was slowly accepting reality and moving forward. She wasn't. She was planning murder. The case exploded in the media. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Love triangle ends in murder-suicide. Obsessed wife kills husband's mistress. The headlines were sensational, but they couldn't capture the full horror of what had happened. Mark was destroyed. He felt responsible, not just for the affair, but for pushing Jennair to the breaking point. He believed that if it weren't for him, Meredith would still be alive. He said he should have died instead of her. He admitted feeling guilty for not recognizing how disturbed Jennair had become, for not seeing the warning signs that now seemed so obvious in hindsight. Mark said he'd forgiven Jennair for what she'd done to him, for the surveillance, the manipulation, the lies, but he could never forgive her for taking Meredith's life. An innocent woman, someone who'd simply fallen in love with the wrong person at the wrong time, was dead because of Jennair's obsession. Mark sold everything he owned and moved across the country to San Diego. He took a job in marketing for a luxury hotel chain, trying to rebuild his shattered life. He wrote a book about the case, titled Irreparable, in which he detailed the entire tragedy. He also runs a blog, using his platform to raise awareness about mental health issues, warning others about the signs of dangerous obsession and the importance of seeking help. But his efforts have been met with mixed reactions. Some people sympathize with Mark, viewing him as another victim of Jennair's spiral into madness. Others blame him entirely. They argue that if he'd stayed faithful to his wife, or at least ended one relationship before starting another, 2 women would still be alive. Some say Meredith brought it on herself by pursuing a married man and destroying a 20-year marriage. And then there are those who believe Jennair was provoked beyond reason, that the trauma of betrayal and abandonment pushed her into a mental breakdown that she couldn't control. The truth, as always, is complicated. Mental health issues played a role, clearly. Jennair had been struggling with depression for years. The PTSD diagnosis was real. The trauma was real. But so was the calculated nature of her actions. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. It was methodical, planned. She practiced with a gun. She rented a car. She waited in that house for hours. Meredith's husband, Luke Chapman, handled the situation with remarkable grace. He was betrayed just like Jennair, but he didn't kill anyone. He didn't stalk anyone. He didn't plot revenge. He grieved, and he moved on. That contrast raises uncomfortable questions about personal responsibility and the choices we make when we're hurt. Jennair Gerardot was 47 years old when she died. Meredith Chapman was 33. 2 lives ended in violence. 1 destroyed by obsession, 1 stolen by it. This took me hours of painful research, reading autopsies, police files, and the cries of mothers that were ignored. If you feel safe watching from your screen, then please support what we do by giving, by subscribing. We will really appreciate it. This case haunts me. It haunts a lot of people. Because it's not just a story about a murder. It's a story about love turned toxic, about betrayal, about the devastating consequences of secrets and lies. It's about mental illness left untreated, about warning signs ignored, about how quickly a life can spiral out of control. Could this have been prevented? Maybe. If Mark had been honest with Jennair from the beginning. If he'd ended his marriage before starting an affair. If Jennair had told her psychiatrist the truth about what she was planning. If someone, anyone, had recognized the depth of her instability. But hindsight is always clearer than foresight. What do you think? Who's to blame in this tragedy? Was Jennair solely responsible, or does Mark bear some of the guilt? What about Meredith? Was she a victim, or did she make choices that contributed to this outcome? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear from you. This community thrives on discussion, and your perspectives matter. And before you go, do me one more favor. If you found this video compelling, if this story made you think or feel something, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves true crime as much as you do. Subscribe to Cold Crime Cases if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. We cover the most gripping, heartbreaking, and thought-provoking cases out there, and we're just getting started. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the truth is always more complicated than it seems. This is Cold Crime Cases. I'll see you in the next one.